The Samson Meteor mic is one of the best values in audio that you can get, but it has some pretty significant issues that keep it from being perfect. But of course, what's perfect for one person may not necessarily be perfect for someone else, and so for the sake of this video, we'll define perfect as meeting a set of 5 different standards. And by the way, I will have an affiliate link in the description of this video if you'd like to buy one for yourself. But anyway, the first standard that I want to discuss is probably going to be the most important one in this video because it's effectively going to set the bar for the other 4 standards that we talk about. And that standard is price. Now this microphone retails for about $50 to $70 depending on the color that you buy, and a lot of microphones like this tend to go upwards of $75, $100 or even higher, including Samsung's own G-Track Pro. Now that does kind of lower the bar a little bit for the other 4 categories, since other microphones in this price range are going to have a lot more features than this is obviously going to give you for the price. But even still, if this wants to earn a recommendation from me, it's gotta still perform competently in those other 4 categories. As an example, let's go ahead and discuss our second standard. One of the big benefits of a plug-and-play USB microphone like this is just the number of options that it gives you in how and where it can be used. This usually depends on the types of options that it can give you for things like mounting and the way it picks up audio and things like this. And in general, the more robust a microphone is, then the more options it can give users in how they can use it. Personally, I think that this is just one area that the Meteor really excels in, but it's got some issues that keep it from being perfect. In terms of durability, the weight of this thing really surprised me. It's super compact, yet it's made entirely out of metal and is reassuringly heavy. The only plastic that you really get on this is the mute button on the front, but we'll get to that later. Aside from this matte black option, you also can get a matte white or the standard chrome color, which will be cheaper than the matte option. It also has a thread on the bottom for mounting to a boom arm. Personally, I use the newer boom arm, which is relatively inexpensive and does a really good job of getting the microphone closer to your mouth, so it sounds better. I'll link it in the description if you're interested, but it should work with any standard microphone mount. Now you're probably wondering about those flaws that I mentioned earlier. First of all, the legs are great for adjustment, and the rubber feet on the bottom do a really good job of keeping the microphone from sliding around. The problem is the feet are so short that an external arm or stand is kind of a necessity. Not to mention that the feet can't really be easily removed, so even when it is on a stand, it just looks a bit awkward. Second of all, there's no swivel adjustment. Microphones tend to sound best when the capsule is aimed towards your mouth, but even though you can adjust the position of the legs, you can't tilt or swivel the microphone when it's on a stand, which can make positioning it a bit more tedious. That being said, a lot of microphones I've seen, like the Blue Yeti, also don't swivel on a boom arm. Now, if all you really want is just a microphone that lets you be heard, that may not necessarily be a big issue, but for people like myself who make content on the internet, that little bit of extra flexibility can definitely go a long way. Finally, even though the small size is really good for portability, it also means there really isn't enough room for an external shock mount to dampen any desk vibrations, of which this picks up a lot. But even more important than all of this is our third standard. Now, nothing of course is worth buying if it doesn't work properly, and when it comes to USB microphones, really you just want the microphone to record a clean signal without it dropping out or anything like that. Like, you just want it to work the way it's intended. And the thing is, in general, USB microphones are pretty notorious for generating a pretty noisy recording with things like white noise and sometimes even buzzing showing up in the recording. And this is kind of where things start to get a little bit mixed, because on one hand, this does record audio really reliably. I've personally never had any issues with it. The problem is, this does kind of fall into that category of the noisy internals that you're gonna find on some cheaper USB microphones. If you spend more, like upwards of like $200 on a more expensive USB microphone, then you're gonna have less of a chance that that's gonna happen. It does happen, but it's less of a chance of doing that. Whereas with a cheaper USB microphone like this, you're definitely gonna start getting that a little bit. I've noticed in my own recordings, especially listening to them back in my video editing software, that it does generate a little bit of that white noise as well as a little bit of static, as you can hear for yourself in this little audio sample. Thankfully, whenever I do use this in my videos, it's never really that noticeable, but I have noticed more often than not in the actual video editing software that I can't help but notice it every now and then. It's not the biggest issue in the world, especially if you're just using this for general use, but in my use case I have tended to notice it a bit more, and it is definitely worth noting if you're looking into this. But now let's talk about our fourth standard. Now at the end of the day, you do buy a microphone to accomplish the goal of recording audio. But the thing about USB microphones is that they can be pretty capable little devices. Obviously, if you invest in a more expensive microphone, you're gonna get a lot more dials and features and such. I believe Samson's G-Track Pro even has a port for instruments. But in general, what you're gonna see on a lot of USB mics is things like headphone jacks for monitoring your audio while you're recording, or things like dials for adjusting your volume or your headphone output and things like this. And things like that are usually considered pretty standard on USB microphones. Now, the Meteor itself isn't really what you'd consider a feature-rich microphone, if you will, but for the price, it does give you a lot of the features that you need and less of those that you wouldn't really need in just day-to-day usage. The microphone is designed to pick up sound from the front to mostly focus on your voice, and it also has a mini USB port on the back for power, as well as a headphone jack. Like I mentioned earlier, the headphone jack lets you listen to your recording in real time, and there's also a dial on the front to adjust how loud your recording plays back in your headphones. In the middle of the dial is a small mute button, and the LED on the front will switch between blue and amber depending on whether you're unmuted or muted respectively. Yeah, more expensive microphones like the Samson G-Track Pro or the Blue Yeti will offer you more features like gain control and more ways to capture audio, but for the price and size, you pretty much get everything you need and nothing you don't. Now, of course, we have the main standard of this. It's the reason that you're buying a microphone in the first place. Most people who buy a USB microphone usually don't want to mess with any of the more advanced things that you would otherwise get from a higher end audio setup. You just want to plug it in and have it work well and have it sound good. And this is something that I think the Meteor does really well. I personally use this in all of my YouTube videos up until this point, and I've found that aside from the little white noise and static issues, the audio itself is definitely a really nice recording, and I like the way that my voice sounds on it. Of course, microphones are going to sound a bit differently between different people, but in general, I found this to be a really good microphone if you're wanting good audio quality at a lower price point. That being said, I have had some issues overall. First of all, this is what you call a condenser microphone. Condensers are designed to pick up pretty much anything. Now, on one hand, that can be a good thing because it does capture more of the detail in your voice, but on the other hand, it also means that it's picking up literally everything around you, the room vibrations, people across the street, your annoying neighbor mowing the lawn at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's definitely going to pick all that up. And if you're wanting a bit more of an option that's going to reject the sound around you a little bit better, Samson does make an option for that, and I will link that in the description if you think that would fit your needs better than this. Another issue that I have had with it is the fact that it's really prone to picking up vibrations. But overall, the main goal is to get a microphone that is, of course, going to fit your needs as well as possible while giving you a good value. All that being said, you don't need cheap prices to get a good value, including with microphones. Yeah, there are more expensive microphones out there, but usually that increase in price will get you a better microphone that not only has better sound, but also better features. Samson's G-Track Pro, for example, costs around $140, but it does fix a lot of the Meteor's shortcomings. But this concept even extends outside the realm of microphones. For example, my favorite keyboard, the Keychron K8 Pro, costs around $125, and that may sound like a lot for some people, but it is intended to be somewhat of an alternative to custom builds, which can end up being significantly more. So technically, it can be considered a good value. If you want to hear more about this, be sure to click on this video right here where I give my thoughts on this keyboard, because it's surprisingly good for what it offers. So go check that video out next, and I'll see you over there. Adios.